I'm so glad to see you. I actually missed you last week. Welcome back to this week's episode of Closed by Mo. My name is Mohammed. I'm hopefully your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate. I'm also a real estate investor and a realtor based out of New York. Now, in this week's video, we're going to be talking directly to probably my biggest client base, which is first-time home buyers and first-time house hackers in New York City. So keep watching to learn more about some of the tips you should keep in mind before investing in New York City. Now, to start off our list of the best pieces of advice to keep in mind before you start the house hacking process or before you start your search is figure out what your actual budget is. Now, I say this with a lot of tough love because a lot of first-time investors, a lot of new house hackers will get a little bit lost in the sauce when it comes to doing the research on a particular market or doing the research on a deal. What I mean by that is you'll pull the cart before the horse and you'll get so bogged down with the details of researching your market area, figuring out the demographics, the job growth, the population stability. Things like that are important, but they're very auxiliary to the most important aspect, which is your budget, right? There's no point in looking and doing all this homework in a market that you figure out you can't even afford to buy a regular priced home in, right? So I always say start with your budget, figure out exactly how much money you're putting aside for this, or figure out how much your approval amount is for this, and then we can start from that point because that's going to be the most tangible aspect of the entire search parameter, right? That's not going to change anytime soon or very quickly, all else considered equal. The second bit of advice I give to all new house hackers, especially people that are just starting their process, have a very clear goal in mind. Now, what I mean by that is real estate is one of those things where you can go in so many different avenues. You can go in to buy and hold and, aim to hold the property for several years before selling it for a profit. You can also possibly, buy it for cash flow focus and maybe profit every single month. You can also buy it to live in it, to fix it, and then eventually flip it within a few years. There's a lot of different avenues that you can take in real estate investing, and what I always like to advise my clients is figure out which avenue is most important to you, figure out which one resonates with you the most, and stick to it, because when we have that in terms of a very clear goal and criteria, we can quickly look at deals to figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because at the end of the day, time kills deals, and the faster we move, the more properties we'll be able to look, the more offers we'll be able to make, the more likely we'll be able to get the deal that you actually want. And the only way we can do that is if you already have a clear idea of what your goals are. The third, and probably something that I've repeated quite some time on this channel and across all my social media as well, is cash flow is not king. This is probably the most important advice that I give for all new house hackers that are looking in New York City. New York City, like any other high-cost metro area, is not a cash flow market. Now, what I mean by that is if you're, expecting to make offers on a property with a very conventional amount of down payment, like 25% or less, or maybe even 10% or less if you're going through a very specific first-time buyer program, don't expect that your cash flow is going to be positive for the first couple of years. That just is not going to happen unless you're buying the property in all cash, obviously. But cash flow is not king in these markets. And what I advise my clients is if that's your primary focus, then you should probably look elsewhere. It's not to say that deals like that don't exist, but those are very hard to come around, and they usually involve a lot of work upfront, like you're buying a property that's run down, putting some money into it to fix it up, and then rent it out for a higher amount. Now, the fourth point that I'd like to make, the best bit of advice that I could give for first-time house hackers in New York City, is understand New York City's laws around short-term rentals and long-term rentals as well. So a lot of times first-time house hackers might have the assumption that they'll buy a property that has a couple of units in it, and then they'll do a short-term rental with one of the units, and the other ones they'll do a long-term. New York City is infamous for adjusting its New York City Airbnb rules, and there's a lot of restrictions about what you can and can't do, and I'll post a link to the blog post I have about this, and I'll make a video about this in the future too, in terms of what New York City's Airbnb rules are. But you should always be educated on those things before you decide to make a decision and pull a trigger on a property. The fifth, and probably one of the more obvious bits of advice that I give to all new house hackers is work with other house hackers. Go and read more house hacking books. Go and attend more house hacking networking events or investor networking events, because your network is going to strengthen when you do more and more of that, and you'll be able to really get ahead of the curve when it comes to any issues that may pop up or any questions that might come up. So for example, if you go to a house hacking real estate event and you end up chatting with someone, you could very well tell them that, hey, I'm having issues with X, Y, and Z tenant, or hey, do you recommend an electrician or a plumber that I can possibly use? And 99% of the time, people are only going to recommend other vendors that they trust and that they prefer to give business to. So you already know that this vendor is going to give you a good experience for a fair price. With that being said, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video of the top house hacking tips before you actually start your search process in New York City. Please leave a like or a thumbs up wherever you're watching this, or maybe even share it with your friends and subscribe if you already haven't done so. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.